Hello, everybody. I assume that everyone can hear me. If I could get could I get the gallery? Okay, thanks everyone for joining us. Sorry for the technical difficulties at the beginning, but now that we have everybody, I'm going to start by saying that we are now doing our pre-study, subject matter of Bill C-10, currently in the House of Commons, where second reading debate has begun, and we are going to consider all themes and elements from Bill C-10 throughout this study. So this is our first day of the study. I just want to say before we start that there have been some issues with simultaneous interpretation noted in other committees this week. So should anyone, or last week rather, should anyone encounter a problem, please flag it immediately to us by raising your hand or saying something that you cannot get the interpretation. Bear in mind, please do not yell into your microphone if you're not getting interpretation. Just repeat it, excuse me, or whatever that may be, because we need to be sensitive to our interpreters. Thank you very much. As you can well imagine that they have large earphones in, and of course they can be very loud if you shout into your microphone. The only other stipulation about interpretation is this: if you do not have a headset with a mic, let's say you're using the Apple headset where there is a cord with a microphone on it, please place the microphone close to your mouth, like this comes up, because that way interpretation are able to hear you. If you can see me, what I'm doing here, it's basically holding the microphone closer to your mouth. We really appreciate that. So we're a little bit behind, so let's get started. And on subject matter of Bill C-10, we have three groups with us to start in the first hour. And from the Association Québécoise de la Production Médiatique, we have Hélène Mercier, who's President and Chief Executive Officer. Fédération Culturelle Canadienne-Française, we have Martin Desberges, who's President. Marie-Christine Morin, who's Executive Director. And finally, we have from the Quebec English Language Production Council, we have Darius Bossé, lawyer with Power Law. We have Kenneth Hirsch, who's the co-chair, and Eva Ludwig, who's member of the board of directors for Quebec Community Groups Network. Thank you, one and all. So let's get this started. You have 5 minutes for your opening round. That is just to give us your initial speech. We're going to start with Madame Messier.
Merci.
Merci, Madame.
Monsieur...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chair members. AQPM advises, represents, and supports over 160 Quebec independent production companies in film, television, and web industries. Thank you for inviting me as you launch your study on Bill C-10. In 2018-2019, Quebec's independent production companies generated $875 million in feature film, television program, and web content production, creating more than 16,000 full-time jobs. For over 50 years now, Quebec independent producers have offered the public, here and elsewhere, original content in the French and English languages. And they were able to do so thanks to the determination of a few pioneers like Graham Spry and Alan Plante. They were the instigators of the Aird Commission, whose 1929 report led to the passage of the first Broadcasting Act in 1932. At that time, the government recognized that it was essential to strengthen Canada's national identity and affirm its cultural sovereignty by providing local programming to Canadians who were up to their ears in American-produced radio shows. Those were the principles that led to the first adoption of the first Broadcasting Act. I think it important to recall them now as you begin the pre-study of Bill C-10. This bill is the first major reform of the Broadcasting Act since 1991. It aims to integrate Canadian and foreign online streaming services into the regulatory framework so that they participate in funding and developing national content. It also seeks to give the CRTC the necessary powers to ensure compliance by these players. The AQPM is overjoyed with this historic step forward. Since the first act in 1932, the landscape has profoundly transformed with the advent of public broadcasting, the creation of institutions such as the NFB, Telefilm Canada, the Canada Media Fund, the establishment of the CRTC, and the adoption of financial and fiscal measures to support the Canadian audiovisual industry. This industry has now reached an annual production in excess of $9 billion, a sizable figure, which seems to show that the industry is doing well, but which hides a troubling reality. In fact, 52% of the audiovisual content produced in Canada is not Canadian content, but Canadian-made content by foreign companies. The rest of the production volume is split between broadcasters' in-house production, which accounts for 13%, with sports, news, and current events programming, and independent production, which accounts for 35% of the total. This means that independent Canadian content, which alone ensures the diversity of feature film, television, and web programming, accounts for only just over 1/3 of the annual volume of Canadian-made production. Can we then question the need to better support the creation, production, distribution, and promotion of Canadian content? The AQPM feels there is an urgent need for action. Traditional sources of funding are on the decline, as are production budgets for original French language content. We must ensure that the ecosystem is adapted to allow production companies to develop, to deploy our creative resources to their full potential, and to protect the future of our cultural identity. Not to mention that mass media such as film, television, and music are essential for protecting the French and Indigenous languages. However, Bill C-10 omits fundamental elements, in particular with respect to adequate protection of original French language content, Canadian talent, and the intellectual property of Canadian production companies. When it comes to Canadian content, we must ensure that it is predominantly made by Canadian creators, that it is owned by Canadian companies, and that original French language content features prominently. Bill C-10 excludes indispensable players in the new media reality, such as social networks for listening to music and audiovisual content, online streaming companies, and internet and cell phone service providers. The enforcement of Canada's broadcasting policy is CRTC's responsibility. The CRTC is therefore the guardian of the objectives listed in Section 3 of the Act and of their transposition into the obligations imposed on broadcasting undertakings. This fundamental role must be accompanied by serious guidance from the government, and that is lacking in the current bill. The Minister of Canadian Heritage wants the bill to put an end to the regulatory asymmetry between traditional broadcasters and online businesses. Bill C-10 provides for fair and equitable treatment for broadcasting undertakings that provide services of a similar nature. The AQPM is concerned that conventional broadcasters may see this as an opportunity to diminish their existing obligations. If we want the integration of new players into the broadcasting ecosystem to lead to new sources of revenue for producing and showcasing more original Canadian content in French, English, and Indigenous languages, better funded content, and diversified genres, then the government should quickly state what its intentions are in this regard. The AQPM would like to point out that it is a member of the Coalition for the Diversity of Cultural Expressions. It therefore supports the amendments developed by the Coalition, but will produce its own brief that will be sent to the committee in the coming weeks. Thank you.
Pour Fédération Culturelle.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, for the French-Canadian Cultural Federation, I have Martin Théberge and Marie-Christine Morin. Would you like to go ahead? Mr. Théberge will be starting. Thank you very much. You have 5 minutes. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, my name is Martin Théberge. I'm president of the French-Canadian Cultural Federation, or FCCF. I'm accompanied by Marie-Christine Morin, Director General. The Canadian broadcasting system is at a turning point. We would like to commend the introduction of the bill, which is a major step forward in its modernization. The Canadian Broadcasting Act is crucial to the maintenance of the identity and cultural sovereignty in Canada. Thank you for the invitation to appear before your committee today to present the essence of our thinking and our main demands regarding the bill under consideration with respect to the issues and needs specific to official language minority communities, OLMCs. In addition to being the spokesperson for the Acadian and French Canadian arts and culture ecosystem, the FCCA is proud to present to you the following demands, which are backed by broad consensus. Our horizontal collaborative efforts have yielded results. Like our members, our partners in the Federation of Acadian and Francophone Communities of Canada, the FCFA, and partners in the Quebec English Producers Community, QEPC, formally support our position. It is important to note that the FCCF has also joined the Coalition for the Diversity of Cultural Expressions, CDEC, of which it is a member. And to conclude now on the quality of our internal work process, the FCCF is accompanied by external, legal, and institutional services in support of our position. The changes requested by the FCCF have four main objectives. 1. To ensure that the Canadian broadcasting policy takes into account the unique situation of OLMCs, the challenges and issues specific to the Francophone minority language context, and the updated objectives of Canada's legislative framework for broadcasting. 2. Clarify the mission of the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, the CRTC, to reflect the unique needs and realities of OLMCs. 3. Reinforce the objectives regarding original French language content to take into account the unique situation of French in Canada. And 4. Provide a framework for online distribution undertakings so that the CRTC can issue mandatory distribution orders and to ensure a fair share of Canadian content. There must be a significant proportion of original French language programs, in addition to ensuring their optimum visibility. The CCF understands the importance of what it is asking you to support and what that means for the fragile arts and culture ecosystem. The choices about to be made concerning broadcasting will be critical in defining the possibility to watch, listen, create, and produce in French. And what's more, in protecting Canada's cultural sovereignty. The FCCF is adamant that legislators must be explicit about their intentions regarding OLMCs in Bill C-10. Our experience has shown that only a specific mention of OLMCs will allow us to work towards having our communities fully participate in the Canadian broadcasting system. Before our appearance, the FCCF submitted a position paper to the clerk of the committee, proposing the precise wording of the amendments that we recommend with detailed explanations. We are convinced that incorporating our points to amend the current version of Bill C-10 will allow for greater participation of OLMCs in the Canadian broadcasting system and will also foster their sustainable cultural development. Thank you for listening. It will now be our pleasure to answer your questions.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have the Quebec English Language Production Council.
Hand who wishes to begin? Mr. Hirsch. Now, Mr. Hirsch, you joined us late. Unfortunately, you were able to do a sound check. Can you just say very slowly who you are and the first line of your speech so we can get a sound check? If I hold my hand up, please stop for a second to make sure that we get it. This is for interpretation. Go ahead.
In Quebec, we are an increasingly vulnerable minority.
Yes.
It's not me starting, no.
No, I'm starting. I'm sorry. It's Eva Ludwig.
No, I understand. I just wanted to get Mr. Hirsch's sound check in before we heard from your group. But Madam Ludwig, please, 5 minutes, please.
Yes. Good morning, Chair Sims and members of the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. My name is Eva Ludwig, and I'm a member of the Executive Committee of the Quebec Community Groups Network, QCGN. I'm accompanied by Mr. Kenneth Hirsch, co-chair of the Quebec English Language Production Council, QEPC, and our counsel, Darius Bosset of Power Law. We represent Quebec's English-speaking community, more than 1 million people. Half of all Canadians living in French or English official language minority communities. Like everyone, we need to know who we are. That means seeing ourselves when we look in our cultural mirrors, not seeing someone else. Like everyone, our language is a key part of our identity, our history, and we hope our future. The English-speaking minority in Quebec is a unique community, not simply an extension of the English majority in the rest of Canada. We are not Americans any more than the Swiss, Belgians, or Quebecois are from France.
Thank you. In Quebec, we are an increasingly vulnerable minority. There are fewer and fewer bilingual municipalities. Our school boards are under attack, and our schools are closing. Our population is aging. Our jobs are leaving Quebec, and our children are following. Over just one generation, English language film and TV production in Quebec has fallen from 25% of total English language production in Canada to just 7%. On our current trajectory, we can foresee the end of OLMC production in Quebec and the jobs that such production represents. Worse, the loss of OLMC production in Quebec will drastically reduce our community's ability to share our distinct and diverse stories with one another, with other Canadians, and with the world. Our communication system, indeed, our cultural sovereignty, has never been under greater assault than it is now from foreign streaming services. It has never been easier to be a cultural consumer, streaming more and more content, paying for more and more platforms to deliver it. Someone else's content, someone else's platforms. The C10 legislation you are now considering is more desperately needed than anything Parliament has enacted for broadcasting since the establishment of the CBC in 1936. Yet, Canada's official language minorities are totally absent from this draft of C10. Despite the parliamentary mandate to support the vitality of official languages minorities in the Broadcasting Act and the Official Languages Act, the draft legislation before you fails to even mention us. We ask you to reconsider and to rectify this regrettable oversight. Canadian broadcasting policies must consider the needs of the official language minorities and help us secure our future.
To that end, the English and French minorities agree on their approach to C10. The Fédération culturelle canadienne-française, as you had heard, said in its letter to the minister, en plus de ces alliances sur le plan francophone.
On top of those alliances, we're proud to confirm the support of Anglo-Quebec organizations to the development of FCCF and to the amendments that it proposes.
The English Language Arts Network and QCGN said in our letter to the minister, we wish to stress that we support the amendments to Bill C10 put forward by the FCCF on December 2nd. These proposed amendments to Bill C10 are aimed at ensuring that Canadian broadcasting policies consider the specific situation of official language minority communities, an objective also pursued by CHPC, QCGN, and ELAN. When tabling Bill C10, the minister said, and I quote, with the modernization of the legislation, Francophone, Anglophone, Indigenous, people with disabilities, racialized, and LGBTQ2+ creators will have the means to tell their own stories. As the bill is now written, that is simply not true. Anglophone and Francophone minority language creators have been excluded. To include us, we respectfully request that 1, the broadcasting's interpretation clause be expanded to expressly include and support French and English minority language communities. 2, the CRTC and the CPC's obligation to ensure that positive measures are taken to enhance the vitality and support of the development of the OLMCs be expressly stated in the Broadcasting Act. And 3, an obligation for the government to consult both official language minority communities be included in the Broadcasting Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ludwig. Now we go directly to questions. We're going to start, of course, and again, I remind my colleagues to please point out who your question is addressed to. We're going to start with the Conservatives. Monsieur Reyes, pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci à tous les témoins d'être présents aujourd'hui, de prendre.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being present here today to help us see how we can improve this Bill C-10. I had the opportunity personally to meet with many organizations in the country. Some of them are here today, and they have told us about their concerns about C-10. I must say at the outset that everyone seems to agree that it was time to modernize the Act on Broadcasting, and the minister decided to divide this project in 3 sections, and that created a little bit of insatisfaction. And one of those dissatisfaction was the concern concerning Francophone productions. We have to make sure that this bill takes that into account to make sure that that the bill protects all linguistic minorities. So my first question would be to the Association culturelle canadienne-française et la Fédération. What would be the elements that we should recommend in the bills to make sure that French be taken into account, whether it be by quotas or not? I don't want to debate this, but do you have anything to recommend specifically regarding this? So, first of all, the Fédération culturelle canadienne-française et l'Association québécoise de production médiatique. As I said, we're concentrating on 4 elements. I won't repeat them, but I would invite Mrs. Morin to present that more in details to make sure that everyone understands those concerns. Yes. So the amendments that we're proposing concerning the improvement of the French content, well, in fact, we have 2 goals. First, to promote French content, French language content, but also French language production to make sure that our ecosystems, which is very fragile, could be protected. So there are 3 amendments that we will be asking for, and some of those alignments are aligned with the Coalition for the Diversité des Expressions Culturelles. I think that there was a good work of cooperation in the francophonie with our colleagues in Quebec and with French-Canadian francophonie. So changes concerning Section 3 and 5 of the bill dealing with the recognition in the production and broadcasting of original French language content, and also modification in Section 5 dealing with creation and production in both official languages. So those are the changes that we're asking for, and we want to be able to make sure of the specific situation of our ecosystem in Section 9 for minorities. Well, too often the CRTC has considered that as French content without making sure that if it was only a translation of content of English programming. So that's why we're talking about original French language production. As Marie-Christine said, we want that to be in Section 3.1. Section 3 is the basis of the Broadcasting Act, and those are the goals of the Act, and this is what the CRTC has to apply. And this includes original French language production coming both from Quebec and from OLMCs. And we want that to have that in Section 5 because it's the mission of CRTC, and also in 9.1 because Section 9.1 are the elements that the CRTC has to consider when it establishes conditions for service orders, whether it be for traditional broadcasters or online players. So we want to make sure that the CRTC remembers and applies this element because we've seen in the past that it was not the case, and we had to intervene and appeal some of the decisions of the CRTC to remind them about the importance that it be original French language content and not only content in French. Because Netflix, for example, offers content in 30 languages, but we have to remember that it has to be original French production.
English language production council. If you had just one element to improve in Bill C-10, what would it be for you? Madame Ludwig or Mr.
Yes,
here,
hello.
here.
Thank you very much for the question. I would just make the point that we're seeking to be recognized under C-10 for very similar reasons, in that we're a minority that is now threatened in terms of production quantity, and we're looking to ensure the vitality of our production community. I'm going to defer to Maître Bossé to answer your specific question as to which point is most vital to us. Maître Bossé.
Merci. Merci pour la question.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Reyes. If we could describe generally the amendment that we propose, it would be to make sure that there is a framework for the Broadcasting Act. Because too often what we see, even though the CRTC and CBC have requirements.
Quickly, Monsieur Bossé.
So the goal is to make sure that commitments and obligations on the CRTC's part are strengthened in the Act.
Madame Bessette, pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all our witnesses this morning. My first question is for Mr. Teberge and Madame Morin from Fédération culturelle canadienne française. We know that the French cultural sector outside of Quebec faces particular challenges. You've mentioned it. Could you talk more specifically about these challenges and what are the measures necessary to support OLMCs? I would say that there are many challenges. First, concerning production, we need clear commitments so that there is French content produced in minority communities. We have an ecosystem of production and artists that can create that content, but we need to encourage it because it is in the middle of English sea and it is competing in markets, in Anglophone markets too. Also, we must act because there is some challenges for our content to be known and recognized. So we're asking for amendments in the bill to make sure that we can encourage production and also make sure that it is recognized and known. there isn't much original French content that's available, so we want to make sure that everything that is available can be seen. So that's why we're asking for amendments concerning mandatory distribution so that we can have access to that content everywhere in the country. Thank you very much. Your organization has been asking better regulation of the web giants so that there's a level playing field. What changes would that give to the French cultural environment? I will start. I think that this would be a similar answer to the previous question. Distribution, making sure that the content is known. We don't watch TV the same way we have done in the past. So how do we access that content? Generally, I think the previous answer would apply here too. Well, we're also talking about all the financial adjustments, fiscal adjustments that are needed to make sure that we have a level playing field. And I think that the bill doesn't really solve all these issues that were raised in the EF report. But I think there's some willingness to try to solve that maybe through other bills. Thank you. My last question. This review of the Act would bring positive changes for Canadian cultural community or industry. What is the reaction generally for the French cultural sector outside of Quebec? As I've mentioned before, there's been a lot of work with partners, English in Quebec and French outside of Quebec. Everything is quite positive. We recognize that there are realities that affect certain groups in particular, but there's no major problem. And there seems to be some consensus even. If you allow me, I would add two things quickly. First, we are concerned that we aren't directly mentioned in the bill. So, as Mr. Teberge said, there's been a lot of cooperation to get to a consensus on that issue. So that should be solved because that's really a big concern. And I think that the arts and cultural sector is telling us that there is a concern, or they see that this bill is very important for cultural sovereignty, for access to culture in French everywhere in the country. So what you're doing with this bill is really essential for French language and for our arts sector. Thank you very much. My next question will be for the Quebec English Language Production Council. English production is an important part of the production in Quebec, but we know that that sector has received lower financing in the past years. So what measures are necessary to support English production in Quebec to be more competitive very quickly? Thank you.
Bennett?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. I left the film board about 20 years ago to set up in the private sector. At that time, English language production in Quebec represented about a quarter of production across the country. Now we represent less than 7% of English language content production across the country. If regulation is not in place, the broadcasters who are mostly based in Toronto just don't think about us. We're a diverse and we're a distinct community. In order to ensure the vitality of our production community, we need to see that recognized in C10.
Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Bessette. Monsieur Champoux, pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
For 6 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. It's always a pleasure to see you. Madame Messier, I'll start with you. We have talked earlier about the web giants that will need to contribute to content production. But I would like to discuss with you about which model would you put forward for distributing the money that will come from the web giants. Do you have some idea how that money could be distributed in a fair way? It's very hard because I think it's the CRTC who's going to look at that. I hope that French production will receive its fair share. Often, well, in music, if we look at Canadian funds, Francophone music receives 40% of the funds. With institutions like Telefilm or the Media Fund, we have a third of the funds. It doesn't have to stay that way, so it will depend on the platform that's being used. If it's a platform for French market, there might be more requirements. For other undertakings, it's about 75%. But for web giants, I would hope that it would be at least 40 or 50% of the funds that would go to French content. Because French production in a minority situation is in a particular situation, but it's always difficult when the web giants are present. And the production budgets that we have right now are less for $500,000 per hour, while English production can have budgets that could to $2 million per hour. So it's already not a level playing field. So it's hard to attract viewers. Yes, the CRTC will regulate, but do you think that we could include in the Act some directives to the CRTC, criterias that should be used so that it couldn't go lower than some level? I've looked at the acts in other countries, and it's very difficult with the Canadian Act, which is different, is that the players are so different. We have traditional players, we have new players, we have new platforms, we have Canadian platforms, we have foreign platforms, we have platforms for French market, others for English market. So it's difficult to include quotas in the Act, as is done in France. Yes, it would be reassuring because we're giving a lot of powers to the CRTC. That's why we think in the objective of the Act, we should remind CRTC of the importance of French production so that this gets translated in funding and services. If we wanted to be more specific, we would need to change a lot of the things in the Act to create precise categories that would take into account the market, the level of revenue. It would be very complex. And this is something that has never been done. And that system was not chosen. And CRTC has more leeway to adapt or for adaptation. Do you think that if we used maybe bonuses for the best players, do you think that could be a good system? In which way? Who would be the best players? Yes, like if you produce more, we'll give you more. So some incentive in that way. I don't know. I really don't know. We would have to look at how it would be implemented. But maybe for new players, we would have something more precise and more stringent requirements. But that would be a new way of looking at things. Thank you. Very quickly, I'll go to FCCF. I wanted to ask you, how could we decide what is a fair proportion of representativity in OLMCs? Do you have an idea of the models that we could use in the Act? Mr. Teberge, Madame Morin? I would agree with my colleague. Including quotas would be difficult or maybe too not flexible enough.
En matière de
When it comes to Francophone content, the legislators' intention is something that deserves to be made very clear. And can be described and then later further defined by the CRTC. So it is difficult to give you very specific details. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses for joining us today. This is very, very interesting. Similar to all of my colleagues, I'm sure I have had many meetings about C10, and I'm excited that we're starting the process of looking at it. I also represent the riding of Edmonton Strathcona, and so for many of you, you may not know, but in Alberta, it is one of our strongest Francophone communities. One of the strongest OLMCs that we have in Alberta, and a very, very important part of my riding. So I wanted to start today by asking some questions of the FCCF, Mr. Theberge and Madame Morin. I know that we've talked about this already, but I wanted to give you a bit of an opportunity to expand. So, you know, you spoke about the importance from your perspective of the bill ensuring that broadcasters, both online or not, have to promote the French original content, especially in our linguistic minority communities. Can you talk a little bit more about how that could happen? And you know, I know we've touched on this before, but I'd like to give you a little bit more opportunity to talk about how that could happen. Madame Morin.
Bien sûr. Alors,
Absolutely. One of our recommendations, of course, is by explicitly mentioning OLMCs in the wording. And in Section 3 of the Act, objectives are listed. Our recommendation flows directly from Section 53 of the report. And we also recommend that the Act mentions OLMCs explicitly, and I say that because if we're not named, it's as if we don't really exist. So it's important for the legislators' true intention to be very clear in the Act, and that is why we will propose a very clear amendment that will mention us, so that we're no longer hidden behind ethnocultural precedents in this bill, so that specific consideration is given to linguistic minority communities. As I mentioned before, this is an important act for us because it has to do with showcasing French culture everywhere in the country and to do with our cultural sovereignty. And that is what makes it particularly important for us. This is a major act for Francophone identity everywhere. Very quickly, I would like to add that the revision of this act will have impacts on many other revisions of other acts and many other future decisions. So that is why it is important to set an example here and to act clearly by naming OLMCs, as my colleague said, by naming OLMCs as an integral part of the ecosystem.
Wonderful. And can I assume then that our representatives from the Quebec English Language Production Council would also agree with that explicit naming within the Act?
100%.
Of course, yeah. I thought that would be clear. The next question I have actually is for Madame Messier. I think we all understand that for everyone here, it's essential that this bill include every major player of the cultural ecosystem in Canada to financially take part in the original Canadian content production. And I know you've touched on this already with my colleagues, but could you, I guess, speak a little bit more about why you think the internet distributors have been left out, and should they be asked to contribute to the public programs such as the Canadian Media Fund, especially considering their important role in providing the public the very content that we are currently debating?
I think that there are major exclusions in the bill. We spoke about YouTube, Facebook, and other social media, and they broadcast a lot of music, other audio-visual content. We mentioned digital restrictions that would make things possible for OLMCs on digital platforms. But there are internet and cell phone service providers that we know consume the content, or rather Canadians use those devices to consume content, either their cell phone or their computer, and they use a lot of bandwidth. They are already contributing. We know that there's more and more cord cutting happening. These days, people are consuming content through the internet, through their cell phones, so we do think that they should contribute. We do not agree that they should be excluded. We think they should be included, even if, for example, the CRTC decided for just a few years to take information and to impose accountability and to impose minimum obligations, or to impose obligations on them at a later date. I think that there needs to be foresight. It is necessary to encompass all stakeholders for this legislation to be adequate.
Thank you very much, Ms. McPherson. Now going to our second round. We're up against the clock, folks, so I'm going to have to go into overtime for a few minutes, so I'm going to be fairly strict over this. 5-minute question round for Mr. Aitchison for 5 minutes to start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually don't have questions about the specific presentation. I think it's well laid out and your recommendations are very clear. I guess as I listen, though, I've been thinking more and more about the digital age and what that means for Canadians and their choices. And I'm wondering if maybe I'm not too sure which presenter would like to speak to this, but I guess it's going to give you an opportunity to make a few points maybe that you haven't made. But are Quebecers in general, choosing less original French productions when it comes to their consuming their media? Is there a general trend there, and can you speak to what's actually happening?
I would say that Quebecers are still listening to a lot of local programs. During the pandemic, we had major records in that department. What is interesting is we tend to think that television is dead and that everything happens online now, but I don't subscribe to that school of thought. For example, the Netflix competitors are linear TV and gaming, etc. And there are barriers with reaching Quebec consumers. I think that we shouldn't leave television behind. Quebecers still consume a lot of their national content.
Go ahead, Ms. Morin.
Madame Morin, if I may interrupt. Oui, merci beaucoup.
Pardon.
I'm sorry about that. I was going to add a detail about the Francophonie in Canada. Of course, we do see a lot of people who use conventional TV as a way to consume content, especially when broadband is not available everywhere. We saw a lot of those gaps during the pandemic. And those gaps are a reality in rural Canada. Not having broadband to consume content online.
That point, Ms. Moran, is a very good one, but I wonder if you can speak a little bit more to that as we try to rapidly expand broadband internet access across rural Canada. Do you see this problem being exacerbated, and does Bill C-10 go far enough to address that?
Well, I think that the investments made in broadband are, of course, very welcome. I think that we will see the situation improve in coming years. I think there definitely is an interest in consuming content online, especially among youth and Francophone youth. Francophone youth is not the exception. This is a trend. So this is a sine qua non condition to this movement and this trend towards digital content that is available everywhere.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, I don't really have much more than that. I really appreciate it. Maybe I've saved you a bit of time in your scheduling here.
Yes. Blessed is your soul, sir. As I'm running short on time. Mr. Housefather, 5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et j'aimerais remercier tout.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank all three groups for being here today. You represent linguistic duality, which is at the heart of our country, and the possibility for us to have original local content.
Of producing original English language content in Quebec, because we have two official language minorities in this country, which people are forgetting too often these days. And so I'd like to ask a couple of questions, and I just want to assure the groups that I do support many of the amendments that you have proposed, and I will put them forward when it comes time to amendments. In the brief from the Quebec English Language Production Council, you mentioned that CRTC decisions have historically had very negative impacts on Quebec's English-speaking communities, and the trend is getting worse over the years. Could you just give me a few sentences about that?
Appel au règlement, Monsieur le Président. Je suis désolé d'interrompre, mais on n'a pas accès à la traduction. Je crois qu'il y a une question d'équipement.
Yeah, I agree. It seems we're having a few issues. Everyone just hold on 1 second. I'm going to ask the interpretation to provide, I think if they could just interpret me as I speak. I'm assuming we're missing the French interpretation, perhaps both, but certainly in the French, as the conversation was happening in English. Okay, is it good?
Monsieur le Président, le problème semble être un problème d'équipement selon ce que j'entendais de l'interprète.
See, and I'm not getting your translation or your interpretation right now. Un moment, s'il vous plaît. Apologies, everybody. It appears the sound quality wasn't great enough to hear, Mr. Housefather. I'm not sure if it's a situation where you have to move closer to the mic, although you look pretty close to it as we speak. I'm going to ask you to move again just to see if I can get... All right, can I briefly do a sound check, Mr. Housefather? Could you just say something, please?
Sure. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
One moment, please. There seems to be a high sound emanating from your microphone, Mr. Housefather, and I know you've used it before, I understand that, but it seems we do have an issue at this time. Boy, I'm going to have to ask.
I can't explain why there's a high sound, Mr. Chair.
Nor can I, so can I just get you to hold on for 1 second?
Yep, sure.
I'm going to have to switch. Yep. Would you happen to have another microphone handy, sir?
Again, I don't have another one handy, no, sir.
One moment, folks. I'm going to have to suspend for hopefully just 1 minute. C'est vous ou Madame Desbiens?
C'est moi, Monsieur le Président.
Merci beaucoup.
It's mine. Thank you, sir. So 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, please. Thank you and sorry for all this, Mr. Chair, and to the witnesses. So Mrs. Morin talked about the issue of discoverability. I would like to hear you about that because for minority linguistic communities in the country, I think that this issue of discoverability is a quite sensitive issue. So I'd like you to tell us a little bit more about the impact that it would have to have better rules for discoverability for broadcasters, both linear and digital broadcasters. Thank you. Well, I would say that discoverability or promoting contents deals with the fact that we have to be able to find ourselves on platforms, find those contents. So, of course, several efforts are made by major online platforms. But I believe that if we want to promote French-speaking content and original programming here, we also have to make additional efforts to promote those contents and to make sure that people can not only discover them, but have access to them in a more direct way, maybe. So there should be a mention in the amendments that we're proposing, referring to that sensibility that we should have in the conditions of licenses of broadcasters, to make sure that in those conditions there's a place for easily found contents and representative content of what's happening in the ecosystem. So it would be important because it would allow us to measure or to have access to those contents fully. So we have to take that into account, and I think that it's part of the new landscape in which we are. So produce, but also find ourselves. So I imagine that now you feel that OLMCs in Canada for them, the cultural specificity of those communities is not well reflected. Is that what you want to say? Well, yes, it's certainly a concern regarding the diversity of contents. So when we say, thank you, madam.
2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses again. I would like to actually just ask that perhaps Madame Morin could continue that and just answer that question that we unfortunately had to cut her off on.
Merci beaucoup, Madame McPherson.
Thank you very much, Mrs. McPherson. Yes, so I would say yes, diversity of content. When we say that we want to see and hear ourselves, this is really at the heart of broadcasting. We have to make sure that production promotes talents, that there is original Francophone production put forward, and that we make it discoverable for Canadians. So this is our goal, our ultimate goal. And there's the whole issue of distribution related to that. Yes, there's the issue of production and promoting, but if UniTV has to be in the basic package, well, for Apple TV, there's no obligation to have a compulsory distribution of those contents, those networks. So we have to legislate about that as well.
OLCMs or OLMCs, because it's so important to my community. I guess what I will do, knowing how short we are in time, Madame Messier, is there anything else that you'd like to add as the last takeaway for this panel?
Je pense qu'on n'a pas parlé beaucoup de l'encadrement du CRTC pour nous.
We haven't talked a lot about the supervision of CRTC because the CRTC has a lot of power, so it's important to have the possibility of appealing those decisions of the CRTC to the Governor and Council. It was abolished in the present bill concerning order conditions that will be put on various organizations. So for us, it's important that the political side has the last word to make sure that those policies are well applied. So this is the point that I wanted to emphasize.
To a close, I had 1.5 minutes from Mr. Housefather. Mr. Housefather, you're there. You want to try this one more time?
I'm trying again with the headset that I can't hear from, but I believe maybe they'll be able to hear me better.
Yes.
This is the House of Commons headset that they want me to use.
You have 1.5 minutes, sir. Go ahead.
I don't think I took up 3.5 minutes, but thank you. So I want to come back to my question to Mr. Hirsch. Can you give me an example of where the CRTC has made a ruling that has been negatively impactful to the English-speaking community of Quebec?
Thank you very much for the question. And I'll defer again to Maître Bossé for specifics of law, since I'm not a lawyer. However, I will say that in general, and I know it may or may not be explicit in C10, quotas are very helpful to our production community. And so, we ask that CBC spend a minimum of 10% of their English language production content in Quebec English language. We would ask the same thing of the big streamers that sell content to Canadians as well, and 12% of their development budget. But I'll leave specifics of how CRTC changes have hurt us to Maître Bossé.
I guess I'll just quickly add to this then that's the whole point of the provision, the amendments that are being put forward, is to regulate the exercise of discretion by the CRTC. For example, by explicitly having in the statute that they have to promote the vitality of official language minority communities. Or, for example, another one of the submissions that QEPC, ELAN, and QCGN is putting forward is a duty to be consulted when a decision can have a harmful impact. And so by doing that, we are prospectively trying to avoid harm instead of having to fight down the line. Mr. Housefather, you're a lawyer, so you know how that works. But if you can avoid the harm, then you avoid litigation altogether.
Agreed. Mr. Chair, do I have any time left?
Yes, you do. Go ahead.
So the other question then that I wanted to raise, and I think it's a very important point, is the duty to consult. You guys have asked for the official language minority communities to be consulted with not only when there's a CRTC issue, but also a CBC issue that could potentially impact the official language minority communities. Could you point me to, I know that in your first reference on the Broadcasting Act, you mentioned that the Immigration Act had a similar provision requiring us to take into account the linguistic duality of Canada. Can you point to any other examples where this is found in legislation, Mr. Bosse?
So the duty to consult, however, is jurisprudential. There's definitely a legal foundation for this, but you have to find it in case law. And so you have to read, for example, the Desrochers decision from the Supreme Court of Canada, or the Haida Nation decision from the Supreme Court of Canada. And so the way the amendment is drafted, however, is it reflects what the Supreme Court of Canada has explained in those decisions. So it's not invented. It definitely has a legal and constitutional foundation, in fact, but it's novel in the sense that there isn't this sort of amendment elsewhere.
Thank you, Mr. Bosse. Upon reflection, I just wanted to point out, a minute 30 was well after I interrupted you. It was closer to 2:30, so I gave you 2 minutes and about 28 seconds. Okay, folks, we got to suspend very quickly and get to our next group. Thank you to our guests who came here today. Very informative, and Godspeed. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Again. Okay, we got to move very quickly as we are extremely pressed for time. We will go into overtime past 1 o'clock Eastern. I'll try to keep that to a minimum. Once again, there have been some issues with simultaneous interpretation, and should anyone encounter a problem, please wave your hand or say something. If you say something, please don't raise your voice, as this is a very sensitive interpretation issue. So we have 3 guests with us, and I'm going to introduce the guest and then get right into your 5 minutes. You have up to 5 minutes. I'm going to be very strict on time. I apologize in advance if I interrupt you. First off, we have Alberta Newspaper Group, Ryan McAdams, Group Publisher. Mr. McAdams. You're on mute, sir.
Good morning. Sorry.
Go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much for the floor. I want to thank everyone on this committee for inviting us to speak today. I think it's an important factor that we all face and are challenged with. And I look back on my 35 years of working in and consulting with media. I am quite concerned with where we sit today. More importantly, the public perception of media. What was once a respected and fact-based pillar of our past generations, we are now not much more than a punchline in pop culture. And to illustrate that point, I'll speak to a comment that I heard yesterday from a quote that is, "I'm now old enough to remember when the only fake news around was the National Enquirer." I'm here today with respect and an effort to try to appeal to this community and its members, common sense with a desire to stop the slide into a more out-of-control media sphere. And my talk today is really about the lack and loss of local journalism. We have seen this decline and erosion over the years, and it's been escalated obviously in the last 12 months because of COVID. But newspapers, broadcasters, radio stations alike, you've seen many of them disappear in recent years. It's a concern. It's creating areas of news deserts where there's vast and growing areas where local news is no longer represented, and we lose the ability to communicate to our communities. It is essential, I believe, that we have a functioning Broadcast Act, CRTC, and with controls over what is replacing the news that we once knew it to be. We sit in a shifting media landscape where the narrowing of the function of local news production has been eroded, as I've spoken to earlier, by the erosion of advertising dollars. We look at the impacts of the tech giants and how they siphon off local and national advertising. I mean, you don't need to look any further than what the federal governments used to spend in newspapers and TV and radio stations. They're now largely spent on digital and media campaigns that are internet-based. The problem with that is that the internet giants, the tech giants, they're all US-based, and that money leaves the country. It doesn't get reinvested. It doesn't get employ local people or Canadians, and the tax dollars themselves go away. And where does this fact-based communication and reporting begin, or loss begin? It's the disappearing of all our local stations and newspapers. I think that one of the things that we need to understand is that, the majority of local journalism is produced by community sources, not the national media. We owe our nation and citizens better. The communities across Canada and your constituents want to ensure us that Canadian content will be available and that the digital players are responsible for their contribution to creation of the homegrown content. We've seen recent decisions in France and Australia that begin the process of holding tech giants accountable, and they're doing this by regulating them and putting in place penalties and costs for them to do business. It's important that we feel as I'll say a newspaper industry that the Broadcast Act is holding social media and the internet giants accountable for what they produce and what they distribute and what they disseminate. I know that the Act is looking to make more inroads with respect to the internet, but I also realize and read that it is not taking on any proactive statement with respect to social media. And social media is becoming an increasing player with both information, particularly, and it is, in my opinion, a very big, severe concern with respect to where people get their what they want to call news from, and the fact that the social media is really unpoliced is my biggest and strongest concern. I have provided attachments for the members to read, and that ends my 5 minutes or my time to speak to.
Thank you, Mr. McAdams. And we have Mr. John Petrie, retired broadcaster. Mr. Petrie, you have 5 minutes. Thank you for joining us.
Bonjour, good morning. Yes, I'm John Petrie, and I worked in local radio for over 40 years, so my theme will be focused on radio and regulations affecting it as it evolves into new platforms. I know the importance of local radio and connecting to the community, from reporting local news, covering local sports teams, doing play-by-play, and especially during critical times such as winter blizzards, knowing which roads are open and closed, same with the schools. And same within the summertime when there's tornado watches and warnings out there too, or thunderstorm warnings. Well, you can get a lot of that information on your cell phone. People still turn to traditional media, which gives them assurances of credibility. I know the importance of local radio or media for local business to get their message out to advertising and to nonprofits. And I want to cite you a few examples of the importance of local radio. Back in December, the radio station in Brooks here raised $36,000 in one day for the food bank. And over the last 30 years, the local station has held Rotary Radio Day, helping the Brooks Rotary Club raise $300,000. Local radio gives us a sense of community. And when I say community, that doesn't necessarily mean just people, but it's more of a feeling of common interests, goals, and supports. And you could translate that provincially and nationally too. The CRTC has controlled the licenses of radio stations, which has limited the supply. Unfortunately, the supply has been taken over by larger companies. And yes, that might produce a better product, but in most cases now, the cutbacks have reduced the amount of local programming and jobs. Radio delivery is moving to the internet and other formats. I still listen to a lot of traditional radio, but I listen to it in a new way, either through my cell phone or Bluetooth. Norway, by the way, is a nation of 5 million people and has become the first in the world to phase out analog signals in favor of digital audio broadcasting, which means the FM and the AM signals are gone. Switzerland and Britain are both considering a switch to digital networks. Norway claims the move will free up some cash for broadcasters to invest in programming while providing a clear and more reliable network. Now, Canada will eventually get there. We don't know when that will happen, but it will eventually go that way. And the question is, what happens with our traditional radio stations that are broadcasting through transmitters, especially when cars no longer carry an FM or AM radio? The question now is, will anybody be able to start up an internet radio station and not worry about a transmitter or call letters or frequency? Or will they need a license, or can they just start it up on their own? Traditional radio, as you know, has to follow certain rules, such as playing 35% Canadian content, paying SOCAN fees, following the Canadian broadcast standards, playing the music that they're licensed to play. And of course, they have to have a logger, and they have to keep everything for 30 days for music audits, or in case somebody was slandered. As radio moves to the internet, and most stations now stream through an app such as the Radio Player Canada app, what will the rules for the internet be? Will they still have to play 35% CanCon? Does Spotify or Apple Play or Google Music play 35% CanCon? What about standards for announcers or talk show hosts? On traditional radio, they have rules, but a broadcast on the internet has no rules and few regulations. On the internet, if you listen to a podcast, crude language sometimes has no restraints. Who's going to monitor this, and who's going to control that? And the question then is it even necessary to do so? Now, governments like to think they're the arbiters of regulations and rules, But we saw in the US election, big companies such as Twitter and Facebook and YouTube were making up the rules, deciding on what content could be shared. Also, when a rival to Twitter came along, the major tech companies would not allow them to operate on their platform. Then who decides what can be talked about or played on internet radio? And the question is, do we need controls, or do we let people decide for themselves on what people want to hear and listen to? Now, if you have an online radio station, you need to run it through a provider such as, let's say, Rogers or Bell. Could they shut you down if you were becoming too competitive to them, or reduce your bandwidth or up your price? What will the rules be if I run an online radio station through a platform such as Facebook or YouTube? Who would own the data coming from that? And what would the rules be on foreign ownership? What about paying into the Canadian Media Fund? And again, would there be any requirements for Canadian employment, or could these companies operate outside of Canada? In the end, though, the question is, what do Canadians want from the media? They want to be informed, they want to be entertained, and they want the freedom to choose where they get their information and entertainment from. Now, if you pay for it by a subscription, should there be rules imposed?
Thank you, Mr. Petrie. I apologize for that. You can probably work in the rest of your speech into the questions and answers. You're not done yet. Now we go to Global Village Center. Mr. Ahmad Kassem, for 5 minutes, please.
Turn off your mic.
Mr. Kassem, you're on mute, sir. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you very much, the committee, for inviting us. I fully agree with both Ryan and John. My name is Ahmed Kassim. I have been producing and hosting cultural community television shows for many years in the past decade. Additionally, I have the host of local community radio show and podcast that focuses intercultural relationships in rural communities. All programs are intended to increase awareness and understanding of many cultures and languages in the Brooks area and educate newcomers about their rights and responsibilities in Canada, and to increase newcomer knowledge about communities they live in through interviews with key community leaders and service providers. Bill C-10 is helpful in that if it goes hand in hand with the Canada Broadcasting Act, we would traditional broadcasting. At the same time, we should embrace the new digital world. It's more difficult for families to come together as they used to be and watch one TV screen. You can all watch the same things on a different devices. The online world should pass the same scrutiny as the Broadcast Act, in that the content should not produced by someone from their home, which enables individuals and groups to spread misinformation, which can be harmful and sometimes dangerous. The bill also helps the visible minorities to be part of the broadcasting world, in that the voices of all Canadians matter, not where they come from. It could be said that the bill seeks to even the playing field, so to speak, for content is produced all over Canada. The bill would have them all operate under the same regulatory guidelines. I believe it's critical to ensure any legislation does not result in streaming the audio services to pull out of Canada. The proposed heightened guidelines to which they are required to follow could drive these services out of Canada, therefore now narrowing the scope of media and content available in the country. I'm personally in favor of the bill.
Mr. Kassem, oh, my apologies. We just had a glitch in the interpretation. I think we're back on board now. One moment, please. Right. Mr. Kassem, could I ask you to move that microphone closer to your mouth again?
Okay. Can
Please.
you hear me now?
And I ask that you speak up just a little bit. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I'm personally in favor of the bill, with the caution that I mentioned before. Having all media providers in Canada adhere the same guidelines makes it fairer for smaller broadcast hosts to operate. It also safely regulates and ensures Canadian content available in Canada, keeping us closer to our roots while also avoiding promoting harmful content. To ensure protection and support of local broadcasting and newspapers, especially in our rural communities throughout Canada. The discussions on this topic raises four main questions for me. One, how exactly will this bill protect Canada CanCon? Two, how will the content be vetted? Three, where will it come from? Finally, this creates any new employment opportunities for Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kassem. Sorry for the difficulties there. We're going to go straight to questions now. We're going to start out with the 6-minute question from the Conservatives. Mr. Shields, you're up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate all three witnesses today. Mr. Petrie, you were about to expand a little bit at the end. Would you like to complete that?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Shields. I was just going to say, I just wanted to finish off, when we're making rules there, we have to have a level playing field. And what I mean a level playing field is we have to make sure whatever happens online happens with traditional media as long as it's around here. And if we start to license internet radio stations, I think it would be nice if they were licensed to Canadians and there's no limit on that. Because take our community, for example, we're the community of 100 different voices there, or you get a larger cities, you know, you could have an ethnic radio station, you could have several ethnic radio stations in Toronto or Vancouver. The other thing I wanted to bring up is about content rules, like who decides on content, and if you bring in content rules, does that stifle any creativity there? And the bottom line is taxing streaming services like all other businesses. I think we're all in agreement with that, because the big giants, you know, from the States, they're using our infrastructure, we're paying for it, and they're getting off scot-free. So I think most of us are in agreement that there should be a way they are taxed. Thanks, Mr. Shields.
Thank you. Mr. Kasim, in the sense of this bill, and it has to do with ethno in a sense that talks about it, how critical has it been in the community, the message that you are providing to a wide range of ethnic groups within this region in rural Canada?
Thanks, Mr. Shields. That is very critical. Brooks region is the city of 100 Hollows, and we do have a large number of different ethnic groups from all over the world. That is a very much challenge when it comes to a lot of messaging. That have been proven during the pandemic, COVID-19, and the public health nightmare, as well as the difficulties of the racial conflict, anti-Semitism, anti-racism, and all Islamic phobia. The messaging, as John just mentioned, I think the way that we broadcast through the broadcast, we have we reach out every community through their own language, through their own culture, and that reaching out provides the community to stay in the rural area, provide their families and work and be part of the community they are in. It's very critical to have that voice from the newcomers and valued added to the economic development of Canada in general through all rural areas of Canada. It's very critical to have the voice of the small cities. It's very important to have the voice of every Canadian to add to the value. So I would encourage the committee to look into the community radio or any other means that every voice from the Canadian perspective to be heard in a very effective manner.
Thank you. Mr. Petrie, if there was one recommendation that you said is most important above others, what would it be?
You know, I don't really know, but I'm just going to deviate a little bit here. And one thing I don't think even, I was listening to the last hour here too, one thing people haven't talked about is the collection of data. You know, when Facebook or Google or, and this data becomes so important for advertisers, who owns that data? Who owns the information about me? And I think we have to kind of look at that as a nation, because right now I think Google or Facebook own that data, which is important for their advertisers. They can target their advertisers in Brooks or Chicoutimi or St. John, where. So I think we got to take a look at that. And I don't know where this all fits into this here too, but I think that's kind of key too.
Good point. Thank you. From the Newspaper Association, you moved into local media and you talked about where the closest media is and probably the most factual in a sense because it has to be local. Response to how we're going to do that in rural?
Sorry, you broke up there, Mr. Shields.
I'm talking about, you talked about the accuracy of rural radio, newspaper, what it is and how important it is in rural and how accurate it is. How are we going to maintain that?
Well, we as you are aware, because of your writing, we have a large or growing gaps of news deserts. The only way we can do it is through support and a growing level of coordination by taking the tech giants to task with respect to how they create and I'll say scrape content from the local sites. If they don't participate in some level and contribute to our challenge, we will see an increasing decline of local reporting.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate your responses. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Shields. Mr. Lewis, 6 minutes, please.
I thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I thank all of the witnesses for being here. This is an amazing opportunity, and I hope I get a chance to talk to each of you, so I'll dive right in. Mr. Kasim, I'm very interested in hearing more. The smaller the communities I find in Canada, the more challenges you have promoting diversity and promoting inclusivity. And you seem to be doing an amazing job. I looked up your organization and the insights, the advice, the promoting the community events, diversity awareness, empowering newcomers. You're doing a wonderful job, and I appreciate that. And I know that in the clause, one of the clauses of the bills outlines in Section 3 of the Broadcasting Act to emphasize that Canadian broadcast system should, quote, serve the needs and interests of all Canadians, including Canadians from racialized communities, diverse ethnocultural backgrounds, socioeconomic statuses, abilities and disabilities, sexual orientations, gender identities, expressions, and ages. So I wondered if you could further comment. It's always wonderful to hear a success story of something from one of your local stories that you hear on your show in promoting people feeling comfortable in a small community.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir, and highly appreciate it. We've been working very hard to have the newcomers integrate to the rural area as part of the rural immigration policy of both the federal government as well as provincial governments for many years. When someone comes from overseas, they will be coming to a country they have no connection. They will be running away from problems, or they will be coming their own choice. But always there is a difficulty coming away from your social net or family social net, coming to a new culture, language, new different environment. So that alone will put stress on many of the newcomers or immigrants. So what we emphasize is our show is to highlight the success story of those immigrants who contributed well and have businesses in the country. When they came to Canada, as we all call the country of a paradise, we very lucky to be in Canada. They are very excited to be here. Some of them make the success due to the hard working. They are very much business minded, most of them. So we invite those business entrepreneurship to the show. So that way, the rest of the people will see hard working, dedication will pay off in the long run. We always try not to entertain the notion of a victimhood or the notion of blaming others for your shortcoming. That is the way that you can empower individual, educate them, give them the tools to succeed, rather than having them depending on you. So we help them to achieve the tools. We give them the tools to succeed in Canada and open up a new life. But they have to be hard work, honest dedication, and willing to contribute to the society that they are in. So the show dedicates most of the newcomers, immigrants who have a business, who are professionals. Most of them are from South Africa. Most of them are medical doctors from South Africa. We invite them so they talk about their success, their difficulties when they come to Canada, the challenge they face. So the rest of the listeners will see how difficult it was for them, but how they achieve the success after that difficulty. So there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. And those stories, they are all in our website. Anyone can link and watch all those nice stories.
Yeah, I did. Thank you. It has that feeling of success breeds success, and people watching. If you can see it, you can be it. So I thank you. I'm going to keep moving on, Mr. Petrie. I know the importance of local radio. I myself was a host of a local radio station. I volunteered and served for 7 years on local radio. So I understand the balance. The balance right now is how digital technologies have changed, and basically how we can balance protect our cultural environment here, promote our artists worldwide, and still protect our identity here. Now, you work with also with Stingray Music, and so
I did at one time. Yeah, I'm retired now. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, you're talking about 40 million viewers in about 150 states. So we want to promote Canadian music and Canadian stories outside Canada, but we want to protect our local stories. Can you tell me a good way to try and strike that balance, in your opinion?
Okay. You're talking about the CanCon regulations then? Is that?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yeah. You know, the CanCon, that's a tough one because I'm a firm believer in Canadian content and promoting local artists. And I think you can kind of do that. You know, a lot of our radio stations we're restricted by it. I think somebody brought it up before, the programming out of Toronto. If it doesn't appeal in Toronto, and I have a guy playing a nice song around Brooks here, I don't have much leeway anymore, you know, for that music to get on the air here. So we have to open up that too. The other thing, and I'll mention about CanCon. CanCon, I think you might be able to correct me, or somebody, it was about the 70s, I think it came up here. But do we need, and this is where we have to challenge ourselves, how important is that 35% Canadian content anymore? Would Justin Bieber make it? Would Drake have made it? Would The Weeknd make it? Would Celine Dion have all, made it without that 35% Canadian content? I don't know, but I think we all want to promote our local music because I mean, we want our stars to be big because they do represent us on the world stage. I mean, we're proud. The Weeknd's at the Super Bowl. Every Canadian, that's Canadian. We're proud of that, and we've got to promote that.
Thank you very much, everyone. Monsieur Champoux, pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Champoux, you have 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would like to continue with Mr. Petrie, if I may. I was also a former radio host, so it's music to my ears to hear you speak about older technologies that young people today don't even know about. Recently, I was speaking to a young radio host, and he was talking about 50,000 watts and different amounts of watts, and he was completely lost. He didn't know what I was talking about. With Kevin Waugh and my other colleagues, I think we have about 150 years of experience around the table here in radio. Most of all, I wanted to talk to you about the speed at which this industry is changing, and particularly in the past years. At the heart of your career, did you expect these concerns? I'm not talking about technology, but I'm talking about protection of identity and cultural identity in Quebec, but also in Canada in general. Did you anticipate these over your career in general?
You know what? I've always been a proud Canadian, and I've always, when a show like Cornered Gas comes on or Schitt's Creek or whatever, I always made a point of watching it. I was probably one of the first ones to watch Cornered Gas or Schitt's Creek. I was a fan even before it became, famous like that. So I'm, did I see it going and evolving that way? I think we've always been influenced by the Americans. I mean, their production house is so big, and Canadians, I mean, and I look at, when shows started to come out of Canada, we didn't make them Canadian. We tried to make them look like, when they filmed something in Toronto, they tried to make it Los Angeles or New York. And I think we have to promote more, like Corner Gas or Schitt's Creek, or, things that Canadians will watch it, and so will Americans, and so will the world, if it's a good production.
Est-ce que vous avez l'impression qu'on risque de...
Do you feel that we run the risk of dropping the ball with the arrival of the web giants if we don't control more regulation now? I imagine that this is what you feel.
Hey, but we get there. I don't, do we put, we can produce more local content, but the problem is how do we promote it around the world? I could produce a program here, and I think Ryan, a lot of people will open up a business and they open up a website, not realize, okay, they think everybody's going to go to that website. The problem is there's 3 billion websites in the world. The issue is, how do you promote it? And the giants do. Netflix has the ability to do a lot of promotion, whereas I produce a movie here. I don't have the background to promote it. We can produce it here, but promotion is the other thing that we have to work on.
Il y a une école de pensée.
There's a school of thought now saying that we should lighten the requirements for traditional broadcasters instead of imposing the same constraints and the same rules to new technologies. What do you feel about this? Do you think that we should maintain the present level of regulation and impose it to new players, or to lighten the burden?
I think we have to lighten it up, yeah. And like I mentioned before, with the traditional broadcasters, I mean, if they're forced to play 35% CanCon, do the online radio stations have to play 35% CanCon? Or, yeah, I think we have to lighten it up, because it does open up the field here. We don't know where this is going to go. Like, a lot of this has happened pretty rapidly in the last, basically almost 5 years. I've seen, because we have some former radio announcers on here, I've seen even in this province here where one broadcaster lost his job at a radio station, and he's doing YouTube now and streaming his stuff and getting a lot of listeners, not going through any other channels. So I mean, a lot of people can do that.
On a vu
So we've seen the 1991 regulation, and 30 years later, we're now seeing the reform of this act. And we've said that the evolution of that industry is occurring much more faster now than in the 90s or 80s. So do you think that we should review the act and review it more frequently? And how often would it be wise to review this Broadcasting Act?
What's the one thing I think people talk about Moore's Law, the exponential growth of technology? We have to almost review it every 3 years, because you look back in the last year, I mean, what we're doing today probably didn't exist, like 18 months ago before the pandemic. And the way we're communicating through Zoom and technology like that, the growth is phenomenal. And yeah, I think it should be reviewed more often. Yeah.
Okay, folks, thank you. Now, before I get to the last question, the last question for this round, it looks like we could extend to 10 minutes. So that takes us to 1:10 Eastern, given the issues that we had earlier. I'm now going to go to Ms. McPherson. Before I do, though, January 18th, 1971 was the introduction of CanCon rules. Ms. McPherson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, for your detailed knowledge of the subject matter and dates.
Google, ma'am. Google.
You don't have to admit it. I will say it's lovely to see so many members of the community from Alberta. I am not an old radio host, so I have I don't come with that expertise, but I have an awful lot of interest in the vital importance of local media and how we are watching local media disintegrate. So I think I might ask the same questions to many of you, but I'll start with Mr. McAdams. You spoke a lot about local media and what we stand to lose. And one of the things that's been brought up to me time and time again as I've met with stakeholders is that our local media is often a place where our journalists begin their careers. It's often a training ground, I guess, for local media. Could you talk about the impact on journalist development and what that looks like in Canada, considering the attacks on our local media?
That's an interesting question. It's one of the areas where we struggle more than we even want to acknowledge in our own industry. It has become an area where recruiting of new reporters is almost to the point where they don't. Well, it is to the point where they don't apply. We continually look for. We're continually in contact with journalism schools, newspapers, and local radio stations, even for that matter. The number of reporters that we have today, compared to even 5 years ago, would be, I would say, roughly a third to a half less. And it's just not an area where, when we do get people to apply, we ask them the question: what was the you applied? What else were you looking for? Or what brought you to this? And it's rare that they say that they have a passion for newspapers or for local media. It's more they're all the younger generation is looking for digital-based in environments for careers. It's not something that they look to as even an area to consider.
Yeah, because there isn't the opportunities for them to thrive in that area.
There isn't the opportunities, and there's also not the I'll say the cool factor to newspapers or local media that there is to digital.
Mm-hmm.
As reality, that's the reality.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Well, and I think it's true that we've also seen diminished, even within our larger publications, the diminishment of local content. So, for example, in the Edmonton Journal, there is much less local content in that paper. One of the other things that you'd spoken about, Mr. McAdams, was the imbalance of revenue. So we've seen drastic cuts to revenue for some of our local media. Mm-hmm. From your perspective, how would you rectify that situation? How would you correct the imbalance of revenue? Are the current programs working? What would you like to see in legislation to correct some of that revenue?
Well, I think one of the things that we've seen disappear in recent, I won't say years, in the past decade, is the virtual disappearance of government advertising. And it's the changes that have been, I'll say, permitted or with the MGA Act, where the municipal governments now can advertise local bylaw changes to their digital platforms or to their own website. And I question the message being seen by the majority of the population that it once was. Even when you get into provincial and federal politics, it's the same thing. The proliferation of advertising that once was spent in traditional media, whether it be print, radio, TV, is now gone digital. And as I mentioned in my speaking portion, the digital portion of that dollar is largely leaving Canada, and it has no lingering job impacts or tax impacts left behind.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Petrie, could you comment on that as well? Do you have anything that you'd like to add in terms of the revenue and the imbalance that we see in revenues for local media?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. McAdams there too. Like that, we have to find a way to get that revenue back into our country here. Use Netflix for an example. I think they got where's Mr. Google here? I think they got about 8 million subscribers in Canada here. I translate that into even at a low rate of $10, it's up to about $16 now. $80 million a month they're making. You know, translate that over a year. How much tax revenue are we actually getting from Netflix? Now, a GST is a little bit different on that, you know, but we have to find a way to get it back. I'll give you another example, and I'll refer to the former mayor of Brooks, Mr. Martin Shields here. We have Amazon delivering packages into our community every day. We have Skip the Dishes. We have all these other ones. They're taking a ton of money out of our community. We're paying for the infrastructure and everything else, and we're not getting anything back. So there's an example of sort of skip the dishes or Amazon and Netflix and Facebook and Google and all that. So we have to find a way to get it back.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And my last question, I know I'm running out of time, but for Mr. Kassem, thank you very much for everything that you've done and all of your information about the diaspora and cultural community content. One of the things that you talked about was the accuracy of content. Could you talk a little bit about what you'd like to see in C10 to ensure that particularly online, we are getting accurate content to audiences? We're having some challenges.
Yeah, I think is it Mr. Kasim you were talking to, I think? Yeah.
That's correct.
No, I think we may have lost him.
Okay, well, if he comes back, I will. If I get a second stab, I'll try to get him at that point.
Okay, thank you. Expected 7.96 million subscribers, Canadian subscribers to Netflix. We now go to Mr. Wah, from one old broadcaster and myself to another radio broadcaster. Mr. Wah.
Yeah, thank you, and good to see everyone. Broadcasting has changed. I just finished The Tangled Garden. It's a fascinating book. I would think everyone on this committee should read it. The Broadcasting Act does not pertain to newspapers today. So, Mr. McAdams, you're right. The governments across the world are pulling ads from newspapers. Not only in Canada, I have Press Reader and I read a lot of newspapers worldwide. Governments no longer are going to subsidize newspapers in the world. I see it. And that's just the way it is. That's the big change. It started with the Harper government in 2010 and it's continued on. I'm not saying it's right, but if you think you can sit and tell us in committee that the governments across the world should spend more in newspapers, it's not going to happen. The shift has happened, and I can tell you it's going to continue to happen, and I don't know where you're going to find your revenues. We did ask Facebook on Friday because they are taking a lot of content from newspapers in this country. They're not paying for it. They don't want to pay for it. We've heard that loud and clear from Mr. Chan. So I would say your newspaper group should start there. Put the pressure on these giants like Facebook and see if you can get anything from them, because the day of the federal government subsidizing newspapers is all but over.
Well, I think you'll find if you read the attachments that I've included in my speaking notes, there is a series of campaigns that the industry has run and has continued to run. In fact, we're launching another one this week with respect to the tech giants and the challenge that we faced with them stealing content and looking for the government. And we realize that they're not going to spend the dollars they used to, Mr. Waugh, but we're looking for their coordinated support in looking at ways to police the tech giants, similar to what Australia and France have done.
Well, France did get an agreement. Australia didn't get an agreement from them. And I would say that's the sticking point in my mind, because I think if Australia would get an agreement, then Canada would soon follow. But I think right now, anyways, from what we heard Friday, Facebook is digging their heels in at the time. Mr. Petrie, good to see you again. It's interesting you talked about Rosetown Radio, CJYM. Like your stations in Brooks, they're owned by Stingray, Rosetown, Kindersley, the Humboldt, I can say Moose Jaw, Estevan, Weyburn. They're no longer owned locally. Golden West Broadcasting out of Manitoba owns all these rural radio stations. And that's a disconnect at times. Yeah. There's no question. You can't go to Coffee Row and talk to the owner of the radio station anymore because he or she doesn't live in that community. So that's the way it is. Unfortunately, radio is hanging on. They've done it to themselves at times. And yes, I agree with you, Mr. Petrie, they do need the help. But the big conglomerates like Jim Pattison is buying up everything in the province here. You see it with Stingray in your community. And that's not good, is it?
But you can get around that by loosening up the licenses on that. Because if the big giants aren't going to do any local programming, maybe somebody else will come along and start up a small. The licenses were brought in basically at one point because the capital cost to start up a radio station was so high, and you wanted to protect it, and you wanted a certain amount of longevity in that. For you or I or Ahmed to start up a community radio station, the capital cost nowadays is minuscule. And in most cases, like I say, you just need a $1,200 laptop and you can start up a radio station in your basement. So, if you loosen up the licenses on that, and then maybe we get back our local programming on that.
Well,
I'm not asking for any government help. I never really believed in that though, but I believe if you have a good product and you have advertisers, that are listening, or you have an audience and you can direct that advertising to them, they'll pay for that content.
Yeah. Mr. Ahmed, I did look at your website. You're into podcasts, which I think is the way of the future. How's that going for your organization?
Sorry, sir, can you just repeat the question again?
I see on your website you do a number of podcasts. How is that going in your community? Because that seems to be the future here.
Yeah, it's going very well. We, especially during the pandemic, during the racial conflict, the podcast was very effective in terms of the newcomers because we provide in different languages. Mainly it's English. We have guests in English, and the reason is for people to understand the language.
Mr. Kassem, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt there. I'm really pressed for time. I apologize. I have to go to Ms. Ian, another former broadcaster. For 5 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses today. Really appreciate your perspectives. Mr. McAdams, I want to start with you just quickly, if I might, and have you delve deeper into your concerns as to the perception of media and the whole idea of what is news, what is real journalism.
Delving into it, we hear a lot of comments back from community citizens and readers that the news that they used to receive has obviously diminished, so they believe that there's less value, there's less truth in it, and that's a function of where they are also getting their news from social media feeds. And then that's where the inaccuracy or discrepancy between one story and the other, where we spend the time as a reporting organization to do fact checking, and we see the feeds that we have, I'll say, in competing feeds with stories that are significantly different in content, and that's where we have a perception of discrepancy between the different types of news that is being reported. We spend the extra time and therefore have less news to able to report based on doing fact checks.
And given the general landscape right now and the challenges that abound, how can we better attract young talent?
Boy, how can we better attract young talent? One of the programs that we had through this pandemic was the local journalism initiative. We took advantage of that, and we were able to get some new blood into our newsrooms, and it has been, I'll say, a refreshing perspective to not only see the difference in terms of how they approach news, how they consume news, and that when we've learned from them in terms of how to how to approach it, how to report it, and how to package it in different fashions.
Thank you so much, Mr. McAdams. Mr. Kasim, I want to go to you now as we continue to navigate this pandemic. Isolation, mental health are huge factors right now. We know this. Can you tell us a little bit about the role of radio as connector, radio as a connector to a community of new Canadians, the people that you serve in particular, and how radio can act as a lifeline?
Thank you. Thank you very much. The radio as well as the broadcast. For now, we use the broadcast more often. The pandemic not only had effect on many Canadians, especially the newcomers and people of color and minorities have a huge impact due to many factors that plays into that economic situation and all that. But isolation is a huge factor. So from the broadcast, we have a psychologist in our office, and we try to invite the psychologist, and they talk about the importance of the having time of yourself. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. One of the main challenges that we're facing is actually the problem of the vaccine. Most of the people, if the vaccine is today available, they will not be taking it regardless of they are newcomers or local people. So that's the challenge that we are facing now, and we hope to come up something next sometime this week or next week. We do have our JBS Canada, which is the largest beef processing in Canada, one of the largest beef processing in Canada. They employ over about 3,000 employees. 90% of them are immigrants or newcomers. They're having a problem of to convince people to take a vaccine. And we're hoping to come up a communication radio or broadcast or video clip to encourage people to take a video clip. But the most important is taking a mental health issue for the newcomers huge, and that will give them a flashback from people where they come from or where they're running away from the problem that they face, isolation, anxiety, depression, that all increase. On top of that, that increase also had an effect of the domestic violence. Domestic violence is increasing in also on our area through also Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Kassim.
People staying in the house all the time, that will affect also their mental health. Thank you.
I apologize. You seem to be the constant victim of my cutting.
No problem.
Folks, that's all the time we have, I'm afraid. I've even pushed it about a couple of minutes. I apologize to my colleagues from the Bloc and the NDP who didn't get their second round in. Perhaps we can work something out in the future. And, of course, the technical difficulties that we had. To our guests, thank you very much. Mr. Kassim, Mr. McAdams, and Mr. Petrie, we thank you for your insights and your experience. Well done. I was not aware that Norway is all digital, for example, so we learn something new every day. Okay, folks, until next Friday, thank you very much, and meeting adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.